beaten, a few of them have been killed, and they're demonstrating it out of despair and anger at what is going on in Jerusalem. The houses of demonstrators are being demolished, and settlers are running ravage over Al-Aqsa Mosque. I draw this to your attention because the irony is that these young Palestinians risking their lives in the streets of Jerusalem have less influence over what's going to happen in the Middle East than any of us in this lecture hall. And what I want to do in my few minutes is to bring home to you how much this is a problem that we can do something about. The young people who are demonstrating, and it is almost the teenagers' intifada, they are up against the police force that has tear gas, rubber bullets, pepper spray, and all the most modern equipment, backed up by an army which of course has helicopters and tanks and F-16s, the fourth best equipped army in the world. There is no way that they can win against the fourth best equipped army in the world. What you may say, well, what can we do 2,000 miles away, and what's it to do with us? But surely you might think only Israel can do anything about it, or the US can do something about it, or maybe possibly the European Union can do something about it. But we need to understand this. Israel is never going to do anything about it. Survey recently showed that 2/3 of the ministers in the present Israeli cabinet are against a two-state solution. They simply want to take over the West Bank. There is no way the Israelis really sincerely want peace. The US, well, of course, we had great hopes that Obama, especially when he made his famous Cairo speech, was going to try to get to grips with the Palestinian situation. And I think he wanted to. But he could easily just switch off the tap of the $3.5 billion a year that the Americans give to the Israelis. But he can't do that because he would be stopped by the US Congress. And the US Congress is more Likud than Likud. It is the most pro-Israeli organization in the world, bar any. So, if Israelis won't and the Americans can't, maybe the EU can. But of course the EU does do some things to help the Palestinians. But anything substantial requires a unanimous vote of all 28 countries in the EU. And as we saw over the UN vote, there is always one country, at least one country in Eastern Europe, that will vote against any serious measures against the Israelis. So, what does that leave you with? The only countries in the world that have any chance of taking any action, that will have any impact on the Israelis, are the leading West European countries, the UK, France, Spain, and countries like that. And that's why it is down to us, and not some other country, to deliver peace and independence for the Palestinians. We're not anywhere close to that yet, but the vote that took place in Parliament on the 13th of October was a great milestone. The votes for Palestinian recognition, 284, those against 12. I mean, that was a fantastic majority. If that vote had been taken 2 years ago, it would have been a majority for Israel. Now it's gone completely the other way. Partly because of the people were shocked by the brutality in the war on Gaza and by the events of the summer, when you remember a boy called Kader was not only killed, he was burnt alive by the settlers, but also because each MP received hundreds of emails from their own constituents, people in their own areas, urging them to support the motion. I leave Sarah to give you some of the figures on that, because she was the mastermind behind the PSC's email campaign. But suffice it to say that when I was an MP, if we got more than 100 or 200 emails on any issue, we would take huge notice of that. It would be very unusual, and we'd feel very, very worried about going against what the people writing the emails said. 200 votes is a lot of, if you're in the marginal seat. some of the MPs, in the week before the vote on recognition of Palestine, got 1,500 emails. It's a fantastic... the truth is, the public are far ahead of the politicians. And only by writing to people writing to their MPs in those numbers have we, the people, produced a vote in Parliament of such magnitude in favour of recognition. Although, Sarah reminded me to tell you an interesting point about that vote. The reason why only 12 people voted against, there are more MPs who are pro-Israeli than 12, I can promise you that. Sadly, there are a lot more. But they knew they'd lost, so they decided to abstain. The 12 who voted against, they were just a bit slow, who hadn't been told or hadn't listened a moment away and hadn't realised that they were supposed to actually not vote. Why do they want to abstain? So that it wouldn't be obvious, they'd be able to say, well, we didn't vote, it's a meaningless vote. They were hoping that maybe it would be 100 to 50 or something like that, they could dismiss it. Well, they can't dismiss a vote of that magnitude. But the interesting thing was that they not only wanted to abstain, they didn't want a vote to be counted. And therefore, when the Speaker called out, all those in favour of the motion shout aye, and hundreds of people shouted aye, all those against the motion shout no. Now, if there'd been a silence then, he would have just taken the motion as carried, without a vote. And you wouldn't know whether your MP had voted for or against, or been there, or been completely absent. So the only way that we could ensure that the MPs would have to go through the voting lobbies and be counted and their names printed in the official record is if somebody shouted no. So some of our side, the yes side, shouted no, and then when they called for tellers, they volunteered to be tellers for the opposite side, just so that you would know whether your MP had voted and which way they'd voted. And that was their plan, to disguise the size of the massive change there has been in Parliament. I'm probably coming towards the end of my 10 minutes, but there's an important thing I want to say, that, of course, recognition of Palestine hasn't changed the lives of Palestinians overnight. They haven't woken up to a new world. Apart from anything else, it's not a binding vote. It's not even forcing the government to recognise Palestine. And even when, I should say, the government recognises Palestine, and the Labour Party has promised that when elected to, which I hope it will be next May, one of the first things it will do will be to recognise Palestine. But everybody recognises that simply recognising Palestine doesn't change their lives. The only visible sign will be that a small sign over the British consulate in East Jerusalem will be taken down and a new one put up saying British Embassy to Palestine. Well, that will be an important symbolic victory, and it'll send a big signal. But the reason why this vote is so important is it tells you that there are enough MPs in the House of Commons to push through policies that will really put economic pressure on the Israelis. The Israelis will only change their policies if there is economic pressure on them. And what we're advocating, and what we hope that you will be a part of pressing for, is to start the economic pressure by discouraging trade with the settlements, and by going on to banning trade with settlements, and removing the trade tariff differentials, so that Israeli goods have to pay the full tariff to come into the EU. And finally, by selective sanctions against the EU. I mean, we need a step-by-step approach, because if you say, I mean, we all support BDS, boycott, divestment, I expect all of us on the platform support BDS tomorrow. But politicians don't. In order to win this battle, we need to take the politicians through it step by step. And the first target we want is a ban on trade by British companies with illegal Israeli settlements. I'm probably you're not even done very well. I'm probably well over my 10 minutes. I leave it there because I know that Sarah and Murad are going to take on the story from there. Thank you.